Greetings, peace. This is Brother Esquire from the All Men Are Not Created Equal podcast. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. First, we want to thank Almighty God, to whom we refer to by so many incredible and amazing names, for coming here before you this afternoon. We also would like to thank our broadcast partners, NNV News, for carrying us across several social media platforms. And today our topic is the education and miseducation of Black boys and young Black men. And we know education has been the bedrock of our families, of our community, and in fact our ancestors, many of whom bled and had given their life to ensure that our communities are educated. And in fact, in our history, we have instances where if you were caught reading a book, the sentence was death. And we know also in the 1930s, 1934 to be exact, there were followers of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad who were arrested for supporting independent Black education. We know that there were some struggles as well as in the 60s regarding education. We know that there are struggles now regarding education. And in fact, in 1985, author Juwanza Kajufu wrote a book entitled Countering the Conspiracy to educate Black boys. But more so than that, we know that this struggle is a day-to-day, hour-to-hour fight. And today we have a wonderful guest with us who has been on the front lines in ensuring that our community is properly educated, particularly young Black boys and young Black men. I would like to bring forth our special guest, and we are so honored, the president and CEO of the Eagle Academy Foundation, Brother David C. Banks. Good afternoon, brother.
Good afternoon, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing well by God's grace. Thank you for taking time out of your super duper busy schedule to be here with us this afternoon.
Well, it's Sunday. I try not to be so busy on Sundays, man. You know, they said God gave us 6 days to work and 1 day to rest. And so I try to relax on Sundays. So this is a good time to catch me, and I'm blessed to be here with you.
Well, thank you much. We're going to get right into it. We see the state of our young Black men as it relates to education. And in fact, there was a statistic that I read just recently that was put out by the Harvard School of Graduate School of Education, and it stated that each year over 320,000 Black boys enter high school, and each year only 160,000 graduate from high school, which means that there's a huge drop off when it comes to Black boys graduating high school and from the Black boys who enter high school. And I know you've been on the front line in ensuring that our young men are educated properly. Can you just give us some background as to how you got involved in education and what is your background?
So, you know, it's so interesting. First of all, I'm a product of the New York City public school system. My mom and dad raised 3 sons. I'm the oldest of the 3. And I'd always thought I was going to be a lawyer, which I ultimately went on to do. Graduated from St. John's Law School, but I was a teacher during the day while I was going to law school at night. And I had never taken any teaching courses in my life when I became a teacher. And I absolutely loved it, Brother Jacques. It was just an amazing connection with young people and trying to help them to transform their own lives and be able to realize their own promise and potential. And it was during that time, I went on, I became an assistant principal. Then I was a principal of a high school in the Bronx that I helped to found that school. And it was during that time that my organization, 100 Black Men, decided that we were going to try to open up an all-boys school in New York City. Now, let me tell you the reason why that came into being. Columbia University put out a report that said that 75% of the state's prison population were coming from 7 neighborhoods in New York City. And you just wrap your mind around that for a moment. You're talking about Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, like the whole entire state. Not only did 75% of the prison population come from New York, but they came from 7 very specific zip codes in New York City. You follow me? South Side, Southeast Queens, South Bronx, Ocean Hill, Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, Central Harlem, where all the places where our people are. Right? This wasn't happening in Bayside, Queens, very specific neighborhoods. And we decided we wanted to do something about that. The graduation rate for Black boys at the time was 32%. So very consistent with these crazy numbers that you were just referring to as well in this most recent study being done out of Harvard. Right? But the problem, Brother Jacques, is this. People were writing policy papers, they were writing position papers, they were having conferences and panel discussions. But it was like at the end of the day, okay, what are we going to actually do to change this? We can't be satisfied with just sitting around and continue to just talk about how bad the problem is. We've got to figure out some ways to provide some solutions for our community. And that was the reason why we created the Eagle Academy for Young Men as the first all-boys public high school. It's not a charter school, it's a traditional public school. We opened in the Bronx 2004. And since that time, we have now opened one in every borough in the city, one in Newark, New Jersey. We got 6 schools, 3,000 young men who attend our schools from grades 6 through 12. And we graduated 2,000 young men and sent them to colleges and universities all across the country. It's been the most amazing thing I've been a part of.
Wow. And thank you so much for that. I know in starting this school, there must have been some tremendous challenges and some pushback, because I could even recall in 1995 when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan called the Million Man March, and there was some that said, well, why all men march? I don't understand, but at the time, the minister had seen the crime level was at an all-time high. The black on black crime was an all-time high. Gang activity, or shall we say, the organized gangs activity in our community was an all-time high. And he made this call to see if we could stop what was happening and actually ameliorate our community. But there was some pushback because when you talk about single gender initiatives, sometimes they can have some challenges with that. What are some of the challenges you faced when saying we want an all boys school?
Well, it's so interesting. First of all, going back to the Million Man March, I was proud to be a part of that march. In fact, not only was I there, my brothers were there, my dad, we all went together, and we were actually selected to be on the front cover of Time magazine, which commemorated the march. So the issue that came out right after the march, I've got it hanging up right on my wall right here in the room. It was called "We Too Sing America," and it was the stories of the men who went to the Million Man March. And my family was on the front cover, and they really wanted to highlight my father as a man who was a New York City police officer and raised 3 sons successfully in New York, and basically said, what were the secrets, right? About how do you keep your family together and how do you make sure you keep your young men on track so that they can go on to become successful in all the things that they want to do. I've taken that same energy to the work that we do at the Eagle Academy to provide a level of love and nurturance for our young men. Some of the pushback around that came at the very beginning, which is, again, people get a little suspect when they see, an initiative for all these brothers. And first of all, they wonder, what does that mean? You're going to leave the girls on the side, and the young ladies, you don't care about them? No, not at all. Is it just for Black boys? And we said, no, it's a public school, so it's open for everybody. But our schools are located in the areas where our children are and our families are. And so you predominantly, Black and Latino boys in our schools, and we've been doing everything we can to try to meet their needs. There were some constitutional legal challenges that were brought, which essentially said, hey, can you have single gender schools in the public school system? Because they used to have single gender schools across New York City, but they became politically incorrect over the years. But what happened was you had Hillary Clinton and several other senators at the time who came together and drafted legislation to say, if you have a single gender school for boys, you should have a similarly situated single gender school for girls as well as part of the district. And what many people don't realize is that before Eagle Academy opened its doors, there was a group called the Young Women's Leadership Schools. They had already opened before we did.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, they were around at least 5 years before Eagle. And that was the question posed to them. What about the boys? And so we came along to balance the playing field. And so you got single gender schools for girls and single gender schools for the young men at the Eagle Academies as well.
Okay. And I know oftentimes when we talk about new schools that are coming into our communities, sometimes there are competing interests as far as for funding, as far as various needs. And I know some of the charter schools that we have in our community aren't necessarily the best neighbors to some of our community schools. What is your take on that?
Well, first of all, I'm a person who believes in choice. I do. And I believe in trying to find the best schools that we can possibly find for all of our children. I don't think any of our children need to be relegated to going to bad schools just because we're trying to make a political point about public schools. That being said, I deeply believe that our commitment as a general population has to be to the traditional public schools. We've got to make sure that we're lifting and making those schools the best that they can possibly be. Because at the end of the day, you can't charter your way out of this educational morass. Charter schools represent less than 2% of the students who go to high school. Most of the charters are in the kindergarten through 8th grade space. Very few are in the high school space, right? And so, I believe we should have good schools, whether they're charters or they're traditional public, but I'm a firm believer in deep support around our traditional public schools. There are I think a lot of the research that's come out about charters has shown that many charters are doing a good job, but there are a lot of other charters who've done an average job or below average job. There's some of the big networks that when we hear charters, we think about Achievement First, Uncommon Schools, KIPP, or we think about Eva Moskowitz, who has been a bit of a lightning rod in terms of some of her work, and there's been a lot of press around some of the negativity that I think that can exist in her schools. I think at the end of the day, though, we want to make sure that our parents have choices around where they would like for their children to go to school. Nobody should be forced to go to an all-boys school like Eagle Academy. I think Eagle Academies are a great option for some families, but not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so some children will thrive better in a big school with lots of choices of programs. Some children do better in a smaller environment where they're known by everybody. But as a parent and as a child, you want to be able to have various options. And these are options, charter schools, Eagle Academies, and so many others that people should be very much made aware of.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to ask now that our viewing audience, you see this is a lively discussion, some great information. And if you have a young man in your household that you're trying to figure out what's the best fit for his education, start a watch party, have him come sit down and listen to this conversation, hit the like button, share this conversation that we're having. We're going to give you a couple of seconds to do so. But we have with us, and we're fortunate to have with us one of the thought leaders in America when we talk about education here. We have Mr. David Banks. Brother Banks, I want to ask you a quick question. When it comes to your admission policy, because sometimes we have independent schools come into our community and they want to do what they call cream. They want to take the very top students, and then when those top students excel the way that anticipated, they want to say, "Look how great we are!
Look how great we are!"
What is the mission policy at Eagle Academy? And if you could talk to that a bit.
Yeah, no. In fact, part of the reason why we created our schools as traditional public schools was so that, and our schools are unscreened. So that means we take on all comers. We don't even select the students who go to our schools. Our admissions policy is driven by the New York City Department of Education. So students apply to our schools, but I'm not responsible for them getting into the school. The Department of Education essentially has its computerized lottery, and they say these are going to be your incoming class for next year. Now watch this. In New York City, special education students represent about 14 or 15% of students across New York City public schools. You know, the percentage of special education in charter schools is around 2 to 3%.
Wait, come back. You got to say that one more time, brother, please.
The special education percentage average at most New York City schools across the board is about 14 to 15%. Charter schools do about 2%. They admit about 2% special education students. That's why you see a lot of the angst between charter and public, because charter schools are able to go off and say, look at the great job that we did, but they're not necessarily dealing with the same population. At Eagle Academy, our special ed population is 30%. We've got more special education students per capita in our schools than any of the schools. Why is that? That's because who's applying to our schools? Black and brown boys. Who are the students who have been referred to special education more than anybody else? Black and brown boys. This goes back to what you mentioned earlier, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, when he wrote his seminal series, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, right? It was that work we talk about, the oversaturation of Black boys and designation of those young men to be in special education programs, like they're emotionally damaged, academically deficient, right? That's what the system has done. And it does it from a very early age. And so what's happening is that you realize Black and brown boys, they get their legs taken out from under them from very early, and them and their families don't even know what hit them. And so they don't wind up graduating from high school. They certainly can't be eligible in a pool like yourself to go off to law school. Can't go to law school if you haven't graduated from high school or much less graduated from college. So you start looking at all these industries, where every industry, whether it's architecture or the banking and finance space or the tech space or the legal profession or the medical profession, everybody says not enough Black males. The only space out there that doesn't say that is the prison industrial complex, right? More than enough over there, right? And so these things are not an accident, Brother Jacques. That's the deal that the community needs to be very much aware of. The die gets cast very early on. And so Eagle is not just, we didn't try to set ourselves up to just be a beacon, which is important, but we also wanted to be a blueprint. So now we've launched what we call the Eagle Institute over the last few years. We are training school districts all across America in how to do this work. Not just if they want to start an all-boys school, but what are the best practices for how you engage young men in the first place? You know that 80% of teachers across America are white and female. That's the American teaching force. And they don't receive one day of training in their schools of education on what does it mean to work with young men of color in your classes. None at all. They just come out. These are people that wanted to be teachers all their lives. They get all the certification. They come out, and now they got a Jacques in front of them. They got a Kwame in front of them. They got a Tyrone in front of them, and who bring an energy, right, and a style that a lot of times they're not prepared for. And so they write it off as negative behavior when it's not negative behavior. You just don't understand me. You don't understand my flow. I ask teachers when they come to get hired at Eagle Academy, do you have any brothers? You ever been around boys? Right? There's an energy, and every mom and dad will tell you, if they have sons and daughters, there's a difference.
Absolutely. And that's a great question to ask a teacher who's going to stand in front of 80 to 90% of black boys and black girls, and for them to be able to articulate exactly what it means to experience the energy, as you said, of a black male or black female student.
Right.
And I looked at, well, first, congratulations on your HBO Max, I guess, documentary called The Infamous Future. If you haven't seen it out there, you have to go. It's on demand, HBO Max, Infamous Future, where our brother is highlighted in the work that he's doing with Eagle Academy. It is profound. It's going to take you through a range of emotions, some happy, some sad, some will get you a little angry because you're just thinking about the potential of our young black men who are being cycled out of school into the school to prison pipeline. But our brother does a tremendous job in that documentary, where it actually invites you to go out and assist. And if we have some brothers and sisters out there that would like to assist the Eagle Academy Foundation, Brother Banks, where can they go to help? Because sometimes we're watching these programs and we're like, I like what brother is saying, I want to help, but may not know what is the proper vehicle. What is the proper vehicle to get in contact with your school or yourself or whatever you need to do?
Tell them to contact me, dbanks at eafny.org. D, that's my first initial, my last name, BANKS, at EAF, that's like Eagle Academy Foundation, NY.org. Let me know. We've got plenty of roles. We got hundreds of brothers who are mentors from the community, and women who are supporting us in any way that they possibly can. And we're just in close proximity to all of our folks. I'll tell you this, I wrote a book. I wrote a book a few years ago as well.
Okay.
Right, called SOAR. How Boys Learn, Succeed, and Develop Character. Right? Check it out. I didn't write that book. In fact, it's so funny because I would do book signings and people would say, I'm getting this book for my son and I want you to sign it for him. And I would certainly oblige, but I would tell them, I didn't write this book for the boys. I wrote this book for the parents. I wrote this book for the adults, for the teachers, anybody who is charged with a level of responsibility to uplift our young men. I wrote it for them because in it are lessons not only of how I was raised, but there are lessons in it as well from the young men and what we have done at the Eagle Academy, and the lessons that all adults really need to understand if you want to make sure you're giving the young men everything they need. Let me give you one example. Boys love to compete, but they don't like to compete one-on-one in the school setting. They want to compete my crew against your crew. That's even outside of school, right? That's why gangs are so prevalent, right? It's so appealing. The gangs have got their colors and their rituals and their protocols. And so if you don't have that positive paradigm to draw from, then you find yourself drawn into that space, right? But if you decide that you are actually going to create an ecosystem that will support them in a positive way, it makes all the difference in the world. Our young men wear uniforms, but every grade has a different tie because it's a form of a rite of passage as you make your way from the 6th grade to the 7th grade, all the way to the gold tie as a senior, where you wear your blazer. Right? It's a building because this is part of our history, our African heritage and our African tradition. Every young man at Eagle Academy recites the poem Invictus every day before they start the day, right? Where literally we talk about the poem of resilience because they need that. And they need that big time in today's times. So these things, but you know what, Brother Jacques, those things don't show up on a test. But what we're talking about is how do you create a holistic framework for our young men to feel good, to take that armor off, that they don't have to be tough guys all the time, and that they can know that they're in a beautiful space where they can grow up naturally from boyhood into being young men, into manhood. They need the village to provide that for them. That's what Eagle does.
Wow. So they say the poem Invictus every morning, every day?
Come on, man. Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole. I think whatever gods may be, For my unconquerable soul.
So,
You know, John Lewis said that was his favorite poem, Congressman Lewis. Nelson Mandela recited that poem every day of those years, 27 years he was locked up on Robbins Island in South Africa. He said it's what kept him sane. That notion that you get knocked down, but God is in you and move strong and don't stay down. Keep focused, keep driven, and stay faithful. It's powerful. Can you imagine the subliminal conscious, what that means for young men?
correct.
If you recite that every day from the time you're in the 6th grade
Man.
until the time you're in the 12th grade, we had a student one time, 2 of our boys, they graduated from Eagle. One went to Syracuse University, the other one went to Buffalo University. And one of the boys at Buffalo, his family, mother got sick and he was ready to drop out of school. And his Eagle brother from Buffalo, from Syracuse, called him, said, we're Eagles, we don't quit. And in the middle of that phone call said, out of the night that covers me, black is the big, come on.
Master of my fate, captain of my soul. Oh man.
And it stays with them. It stays with them.
And I'm getting goosebumps right now, Brother Banks, as you say this, because what you're talking about, you're not going to find in a curriculum.
That's right.
What you're talking about goes beyond what is in a syllabus per se.
That's right. That's right.
And right now the chat room is blowing up. I mean, the sister asked, what book would you recommend to educators? And you did mention your book, which is a great book. She said she read it. Cynthia Turnquest Jones, she said, great book. What other books would you recommend, Brother Banks, if one is looking to get into education, to prepare them for what's ahead when you're teaching Black boys in particular?
Oh man, there's so many books that are out there. Again, I would go back to Dr. Kunjufu's book, certainly, and that's a series of books that he has written. There's some books that are broader about boys in general. By Dr. Michael Fullen has done some great work on boys. I got there are several. If anybody's interested in being in contact with me, I can send you. We have a whole list of books around our boys that people need to be made aware of, that I think could be very helpful. Feel free to reach out to me. We can send you that list that really talks about all of the boys that impact young men. All those books. Absolutely.
And again, you could reach out to the Eagle Academy Foundation at dbanks@eafny.org. We have it in the chat room. And another sister, this is an interactive broadcast, Brother Banks. So yes, we have folks that's just chiming in, giving their opinions, asking questions. We have our wonderful sister from Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, Michelle Achikapong. She said, David is the next chancellor. Or I don't know. We'll see, right? Next time we got to speak it into existence. We speak it into existence, brother. I've been in this system a long time, and I get very frustrated a lot of times with the lack of leadership and the lack of vision, and how our children and our families and our communities suffer as a result of that. And so the Department of Education is certainly a place that needs a much greater level of vision and execution of a real plan. Coming off this pandemic, we've got to reimagine how we do education in the first place. Because I will tell you something, I feel very deeply that what we engage in far too often is our kids are being schooled. Like, we're doing schooling, but we're not educating. There's a difference. See, our kids, you think about your child comes home from school. How was school today? Fine. What'd you do? Right? Not much. It's like pulling that out of them. Because you know what they're doing? They're doing the routine of school. You go from one day to the next. They never know what is connected to or anything. So start thinking about these issues of homelessness that's happening in our community. How come our kids are not studying and learning about that? Issues of climate change. Look at what's going on in Texas right now. Our kids could be studying that in a very deep way throughout their school experience, right? But understanding how money is made, understanding the stock market, right? We're not doing this stuff at all. Correct. Developing debate skills, critical thinking, writing. Our kids should be taking chess so they understand how to think strategically. You know how many of our kids come out of our schools in the 12th grade, they graduated with a high school diploma, mom, dad, everybody shows up, we salute, and they can't even tell you what a congressperson does.
They
Wow.
don't know the difference between a city councilman and a state senator. Have no idea. They don't know how money is made. They don't know what to do if they wanted to create a business. They don't have a bank account. And yet we've had them from pre-K through 12th grade, where we spent about over $300,000 of taxpayers' money for each child. What is the return on investment? What are we getting? We're getting kids who just went to school for all of those years and don't know a hell of a lot. And that's a damn shame. And it doesn't have to be that way, but you need
Brother
leadership
Banks,
to change it.
wow. And I want to stop you right there because I want to talk about New York City budget, what is given to education, because it doesn't seem like we have a money issue, but I want to delve into that a little deeper. But I have to take a quick break, and we're asking everyone, please start a watch party, hit the like button, subscribe to our YouTube page at Brother Esquire on Facebook as well as on YouTube. And right now we're going to go into a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Invite all your friends out.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to get right to the point that we just left off relating to the New York City budget, which I believe is over $70 billion, and 30% of the budget goes towards education. Before I ask you about the interplay of education in New York City, that big budget, and educating Black boys and young Black men, I just want to recognize my brothers from Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, many of whom are educators who are on the line. We have Principal Anthony Hooks. We have Brother James Bethea, who's a college professor. We have James Johnson, who is running for city council in the 27th district, which includes St. Albans, Hollis, Cambridge Heights, Queens Village. And I know you're from Cambridge Heights, Brother Banks, so that means a whole lot to you. I'm sure that race, yes. I'm sure you're watching that race very carefully.
I am.
and I just want to thank my brothers who are serving as mentors in many of these schools. And I'm going to follow up the question with, what can we do as a fraternity to be even more impactful in New York City public schools? But before that, can you talk to us a little bit about this huge budget that we have and how it's being spent or misspent?
Well, first of all, the budget in New York City budget is over $90 billion.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
Yeah. And the New York City Department of Education's budget is about $33 billion. Right. So that's a lot of money. A lot of it is wasted money. And even that budget is not quite big enough, I will tell you, because there's still a lot of funding that we do not get from the state that we are supposed to get in our New York City schools. There's a reason why there should be no reason why every school in New York City doesn't have arts and music and theater, right, in our schools, and a level of technology that we all deserve. The governor has actually been holding back on providing all the real necessary funding that every school should have. Now, that being said, it is still a huge budget, and how that money actually gets spent has been a major challenge, and there's been a lot of wasted funding. And again, I think that comes from the lack of alignment that we see and the lack of vision, truly the vision that we need to have for our schools. There's so many things in our schools that we do where we're wasting time, we're wasting efforts, we're wasting energy, and we're not properly utilizing our budget. But be very clear, the budget should actually be larger than what it is because the governor is not providing all the funding that we need to get. Right. So we spend $25,000 per student in New York City, but that's not what they see at the school level. A lot of that goes to overhead, like to pay for the buildings, to pay for food, to pay for transportation. A principal in New York City may see $10,000 to $12,000 per student actually in their budget. So a lot of challenges we still need to, and they usually can only pay for the teachers that they need, the textbooks, some technology, but they can't always help fund those after-school programs that are so impactful. That's a big deal. That's what I do at Eagle Academy Foundation. I provide that extra funding that makes the school a place where so many young men want to be. Where we're able to send them on trips around the country because we want them to understand to be citizens of the world and not just have a New York, just their own neighborhood mentality. There are things that you have to expose young people to if you want them to be citizens of the world. And we need to do a better job of that.
And speaking of money, I came across in my research that you had some of your students interface with Robert F. Smith, the black billionaire, billionaire. Tell me, what has the feedback been from your young people after that conversation?
Well, first of all, you need to understand the context of that. Every Friday morning, Eagle Academy has a virtual town hall because in our schools, we would have a town hall every day before everybody even goes to class. The whole school gathers in one place, and that's where we lift up our young men. We admonish them when we need to. We show those who've been leading, doing great stuff in leadership. We pour libation for the ancestors and for anybody that's in their lives that they want to talk about, that's something that's on their heart. It's a way in which we are able to deal with our young men from an emotional standpoint. So because of the pandemic, we decided to continue to do it, but to do it virtually. And what's interesting about it is that we now have all the young men across all the Eagle Academies in one space at these Friday town halls. And we've had guest speakers for months now. We started out with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. We had NBC journalist David Ushery. We've had civil rights activists. We've had a whole range of people, and our young men are the ones who ask all of the questions. It is really powerful stuff, right? But we recently had Robert Smith, the billionaire, the richest black person in the country, come in the squares with us for an hour, dropping knowledge about what does it take to be successful. He was amazing, and the kids were so deeply appreciative to have him. He talked to them about the kinds of books that they need to be reading. One of the kids said, how do we follow you on social media? He said, you don't need to worry about following me. You need to be following these companies that I just told you about. So you understand how to make the proper investments, because that's what you should be focused on. But think about it. In our schools, we're not even teaching kids about the stock market and how to invest. All of those things need to be changed. We need to fully reimagine how we're moving in our schools in the first place, because we are not preparing our kids to be able to take their rightful place in society when they come out. That's the reason why so many Americans, it's not just black kids, why so many Americans don't vote in the first place, Brother Jacques, because we don't provide those models for them throughout that K-12 experience so that they come out woke, paying attention to the issues of the day and what's going on, because the forces that be would prefer to maintain the status quo. Because imagine if all of these millions of young people were woke and actually paying attention to what was going on in their communities, in their city, in their state, their country, then their voices get heard and they shake up everything. So elected officials who are sitting in office right now, folks say, hey, why is that person there? Because they obviously are not doing the job. Now you become a threat to all of them. That's the reason why the status quo, they don't want folks to be too woke, because that they represent a threat to everybody and everything, because they can really start to talk about how to turn all of this upside down.
Got it. Brother Banks, there's a comment by one of our esteemed followers, Diane Lake, and she writes, the teacher's curriculum is set by the BOE and the principal of each school. And the principal of each school, their curriculum needs to be examined and changed accordingly to the needs of their Black communities.
Absolutely.
Now, how does one do that? Because it's not as easy as it sounds.
No,
we're talking about a huge bureaucracy in the
Yes.
New York City BOE, right? So
Yes.
how does one go about doing that?
They need
As a
leadership, and that's the problem, right? Like literally, like if I was a chancellor, right? I think about like different things that I would do. First of all, I would absolutely mandate the teaching of African American history within this nation, right? Because that's not just a Black thing. A Black history is American history, and so there's a reason why somebody can put their knee on your neck until a life goes out of your body. That's because they don't believe, they don't think of you as a human being. And why is that? Because he's never been, even that white person has never been exposed to our humanity. And the fact that 400 years, we built this nation. America became an economic superpower on the backs of Black folks as free labor. Folks need to understand that. Drew Brees, the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, he said, I could never take a knee because my family fought in World War. The assumption behind that was that my family didn't. See, he doesn't know that. And the first man that died in the Revolutionary War was a Black man. He's never heard of that because he's not taught and we're not taught. And so all of us are walking around here blind. And when we're all blind, that's really to the detriment of us, more so than anybody else. But as a nation, which has to be in a global economy, we have to have, you can't have a marginalized community sitting on the sideline. We all need to be in this space. So yes, that question about curriculum, teachers need to be freed up, principals need to be freed up to develop curriculum. And they need to understand that they can do that. And we should be drawing. Look at the 1619 project, Nicole Hannah-Jones out of the New York Times. Look at the work of Skip Gates. There's a lot of work. This stuff is already there, but people don't know that they have permission to actually activate that information and make sure that it's happening in their schools. We just gotten really good at complaining about this stuff all the time. Eagle Academy, we don't wait on any of them to tell us what we can teach. Right? There's a basic curriculum and a framework. You got to teach math and you have to teach science and you have to teach English, but we teach the stuff that we think that our kids need to know in order for them to be the most successful and impactful in society. And other schools need to know that they can do that as well.
Thank you so much, Brother Banks. And I can actually bear witness. Several years ago, I was asked to be a speaker at one of the moving up ceremonies at Eagle Academy here in Queens. And I was moved profoundly just by the strength that I saw in these young Black men. And you can tell that they were fed something different. You could tell that their diet was different from the average diet that some of these students are receiving. So
now imagine if all these kids around New York were getting that. Imagine what that would look like. Imagine that kind of energy and that kind of connection. It would be very, very powerful. And that's what needs to be happening.
Absolutely. And Brother Hooks, Principal Hooks writes, we must teach the children the truth. Our history must be taught. And as you mentioned earlier, not only is it good for us, but it's good for those who are outside of our community, because their appreciation for what we've contributed and what we've done might shape their thinking and their actions a bit based on knowing who we are. But more importantly, we need to know who we are first, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep. And Brother Hooks has been a powerful educator for a long time. So I know my dear brother, and we've been out there in this struggle for a long time, and I appreciate him.
And I must also shout out my sister, Dr. Stacy NC Grant, who also sends some well wishes well.
See, now you're taking it to a whole nother level. Now you're taking it to a whole nother level. That's my sister for real.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. and we have some visitors as well as far as Atlanta, Georgia. I have to give a shout out to my brother Kevin Giggers from Morehouse College. We were football teammates at Morehouse between the years of 1988 and 1992. And yes, Morehouse College is an all-male school. I would have to say the best school in the land. You know, like they said, Harvard is the white Morehouse. Morehouse. I must say it changed my life tremendously. But I see Eagle Academy as a mini Morehouse, so to speak.
Yes.
Because I thought it was criminal that from first grade through 12th grade, I had not had a black male teacher in all the years of my schooling. So now you're talking about for 8 hours a day, for 12 years of my educational life, I did not have someone who stood before me as black excellence as a male until I went to Morehouse College.
And think about that. Yes, that's the experience that most students have. They don't see a black male teacher again, but think about it. Think about the calculus on it. We're not graduating black young men from high school. How are they going to position themselves? So think about that small pool, and then an even smaller pool that's graduating from college. So
Correct.
how are they going to position themselves to be the teachers that you see throughout your K-12 experience? The system has done everything it possibly could to eliminate them, their presence, their impact everywhere. And all the research says for students, particularly students of color, when they have a black male teacher, the positive impact that has on them. Just one. So none of all this stuff is by design, brother. This is not an accident. The system that we are operating in was a system that was designed on white supremacy. It is doing exactly what it was supposed to do and what it was designed to do. And so you always hear about a new report that came out and a new study that comes out, and that basically just continues to solidify what we already knew. These are things that the pandemic hit. Black and brown children are doing worse than everybody else. Is that a newsflash? That's just a reaffirmation of all the stuff that we already know. But that's what we do really well. We do that. What we don't do a good enough job is talking about solutions and how do we shift that and how do we change that. Eagle is just in the solution space. It is not the full-on answer, but Eagle is a space that says, hey, we jumped in the water to try to change stuff. Where are you at? Where do we count you? So when you talk about the question earlier about the Mega Psi Phi brothers, many of those brothers have helped at the Eagle Academies over the years, serving as mentors. I would say to those brothers to recommit, whether it's at Eagle or any place else, to really leaning in and continuing to put the word out to all these brothers and sisters that we need you. If you're sitting on the sidelines weighing in or going, go David, great job, that's part of the problem. You have to ask yourself, where do you stand during this revolutionary time right now? Are you actually in the game? Can you point to a person that you're mentoring and hoping to make a difference outside of your own children? But make sure you're taking care of your own children first. Because my father always said, there are a lot of revolutionaries out here, and you turn and pull the curtain back, they're not even taking care of their own kids. Their own kids are part of the problem. So make sure, first of all, you take care of home first. And then beyond that, please reach out to some of these other young brothers and sisters in the community. They need us. I want to thank Brother James Johnson, who's out there because of his commitment to trying to help the young men at Eagle Academy get that football field. Because those things make a difference. That's the outlet that they need. So it's not just going to school, but it's your full-on comprehensive development. It's hard to have a football team if you don't have a field, right? So we need our leaders to make it happen for us. And I appreciate it.
Correct. And Brother Banks, I think a lot of times we discount how important it is to have proper facilities as well. So when you're talking about our young men having a football field is extremely important. Shameless plug here. I'm the president of the Rosa Jets Football Association, and we nurture young men between the ages of 6 through 13. And I must tell you, extracurricular activity goes hand in hand with the academic rigors of any school. And our young men need to have those outlets and to have those proper outlets where they could also exercise their physical prowess as well as their intellectual prowess. And we need leadership that understand that, because oftentimes we're a little one-sided when it comes to approaching the solutions for our young people. And I say
Come
that to
on.
say, I see my
Yes.
brother Kevin Giggins again, and he and I played football at Morehouse College together. And
Wow.
being a student athlete was what kept many of us on the straight and narrow, and allowed us to excel in academics as well. Because I knew as a student athlete at Morehouse College that I couldn't just waste time like some of the other students on campus. So right after
Right.
football practice, straight to the books. Right after the books, get you a nap in, because we had practice 6 o'clock in the morning and didn't have to go to class. And then after class, do it all over again. But
Right.
that part of athletics is what also gave me a lot of discipline, and
right.
it formed tremendous brotherhood where I could reach out anywhere in the United States right now and find one of my Morehouse brothers from the Morehouse football team, and although we haven't talked, just give them a buzz and everything will be all right. I
Man.
also say, Brother Banks, we have with us Reverend Corey Terry, who's doing a tremendous job with our young people, especially around the trades, around the
Yes.
vocational training. Well, what are your thoughts as far as vocational training? Because you all have some students. Listen, college. I might be college material, but that college is not my material that I want right now. I want to do something else. I'm very good with my hands. I'm very good
Yes.
with innovation when it comes to creating things, but college doesn't suit me at this moment.
And
What are your thoughts?
you said so much. I got to tell you, because first of all, Reverend Corey Terry, that's another brother. These are just bad brothers, man, from the community who've been out here, who've been leaning in for a long, long time. Appreciate him as well. Have connections with so many of the people in your audience, right? We were sold a bill of goods, man. We were sold a bill of goods. We are mind, body, and spirit, and all of that has to be fed. And over the years, somehow or another, we got put in a position where the only value that's placed on anything is what you do on a standardized test. That doesn't, it's like, a lot of these kids are studying all day long. They take a test, and at the end of the day, the next day, they don't even know, well, what was it? Because they're not learning it deeply. They're just going through what I call the process of schooling, right? And yet, the notion of being in football, competition, discipline, like all children need to have exposure. They don't have to play football, but they can play other sports. They can be engaged in other extracurricular activities that help to shape them. That makes all the difference in the world. You could be in the theater and your arts program. It all amounts to the same kind of stuff. That's a holistic educational experience. And everybody's not going to college, right? And and there's nothing wrong with developing these other kinds of skills, right? So a lot of times we think about the trades, we think about the old time trades that are still extremely valuable. Whether it's become an electrician, a carpenter, or any of those kinds of things, plumbers, how much money these folks make? Right? We should be all over that as options. Then there's others who really want to go into this tech space and really develop that. Our kids should be able to come out with skills where they have real options to go into different kinds of things. And it's a shame what's happening in our system right now. We go and we send them to school all of these years. They come out, they don't have any of those kinds of skills. They can't go into the trades. If they do, they're just going to be starting from scratch because they got no kind of exposure to that. They're not fully prepared for the rigors of college. I mean, we're just doing a whole lot of stuff, and they're not really preparing these kids for anything. It's really a shame, and it doesn't have to be that way. It takes leadership to change that. But I think that those vocational skills and those trades, we should be lifting that up in a huge way. But again, vision takes vision, brother.
Yes, sir. Brother Banks, we have 5 minutes left. Where did the time go? But I want to spend a little bit of time. First, we're going to take some questions from our Facebook audience as well as our YouTube audience. So if you have any questions for Brother Banks, please put it in the chat. But I wanted to ask you a question. Now, going back to special education. Where do I start? Oftentimes, we look at our young Black men. Some are misdiagnosed. Some are misplaced. Others really need the help and may not be getting the proper help. I remember growing up, and this always boggled my mind at the time. There were some brothers who were exceptional as far as their memory. Some of the brothers who were part of the 5% nation, or we call our 5%ers, or our gods and earths. and they will be able to recite the 120 lessons, I mean, backward and forward, but yet some of them were placed in special education class, but when they got out of class, they were the smartest on the block. They thrived the most when it came to, learning their lessons that many of us was trying to learn at the time. And I wanted to know, what was the actual disconnect, and does that disconnect still exist? And how can we take some of the most brilliant minds that we have and ensure that we don't squander it away? Because if you ask any one of the brothers that I went to school with, they'll tell you they weren't the sharpest tool in the box, but they were able to navigate what they needed to get to where they were. And some of the sharpest brothers that we know of, their life didn't pan out as well. And how can we kind of turn that ocean liner, as Brother Eric Adams say, around?
Yeah. So funny, man. I was just sitting here looking at Malcolm X today on TNT with the great Denzel Washington, and there's that classic scene with him and West Indian Archie, right? And West Indian Archie would kind of come to his demise in the film, but he said, just tell me, Red, did you have that number? I don't know if you remember that scene, right? But he's talking about his West Indian Archie, who didn't have that technical schooling, but his mind. To be able to retain numbers in your head without writing it down. That's the level of brilliance that you have to be able to do that. And yet so many of those young brothers and sisters designated as special ed. It's because it's been part of a design process to keep our brothers down. And it takes a different kind of leadership to ensure that that's not going to happen, right? And so our people are brilliant, right? You're going to have to teach our teachers, right, a level of cultural relevance. And this is black and white, because I want you to be very clear. There are a whole lot of black teachers out here as well who like to point fingers and say, that's right, y'all better tell them. And they think we just talking about the white teachers. And yet many of them, if you gave them a history lesson or tell them you can't walk out of this room today until you pass this test on black history, they'd be there all night long because they haven't been exposed either. So just being black ain't enough, right? We've got to be about the education of our minds. Carter G. Woodson talked about the miseducation of the Negro, right? And so that's real. And the lack of exposure, it still exists today. And even for some of us who consider ourselves educated, right? What are we doing on a daily basis to continue to lift yourself, to lift your mind, your own consciousness around our own history, right? And so we have to continue to just lean in. You need a whole new ecosystem, a whole new infrastructure, man, that says these young brothers and sisters that we have right here now, you cannot have them. A system that has said we're going to run them right on down the faucet and wasted lives. You need leadership that says, not going to happen, not on my watch, right? That's all Eagle Academy is. Eagle Academy is just a place where we said, I don't care about the chancellor. I don't care about the mayor. I don't care about the gang that's around the corner. These young men that we got, you cannot have. We got them.
Love it.
If you had a system of leadership that said, all of these young people, all of them, black, white, brown, yellow, everybody, we got them. You can't have them, right? These negative forces, we can change the whole dynamic of how we do education and the kind of young people that we are producing. But we have folks who do not have that level of vision. We have people who are bureaucrats. They're good people. They're good people. You know, I don't think they necessarily intentionally, many of them don't mean harm, but they're doing harm because they don't have the vision and they simultaneously don't have the courage to change and come out of that standard thinking. It needs leadership, visionary, revolutionary leadership to change the system. Otherwise, man, we continue to have the same talk. We've been having talks like this since I was a little kid. We'll continue to have them 20 years from now. What's wrong? What the system needs are people who will step up to actually make a difference. I'm just doing the best that I can from the vantage point that I'm in. But we need everybody to get on board as a community and lean in all the ways that you can lean in. That's the only way we can change it.
Great. I have a question from one of my community council members, and I serve on the board with her, Dr. Kim West. she asked, Dr. Banks, can you envision an early childhood Eagle Academy to avoid the school to prison pipeline? We are a diverse people and learn differently. Don't penalize our boys for their richness. Wow.
Yeah. So I would say that's a great question. And I would say, can I envision it? Yes. Am I going to do that? No. I've locked in on the space of this grade 6 through 12 space. You know how many groups I've spoken to, the Deltas and the Links and all these other women, and they say, what about an Eagle Academy for girls? And I said, well, why don't you start one, right? Because this idea that, go is, again, that's another example. Go, Mr. Banks. I'm saying, no, I'm doing what I can do. What are you doing? So I'm going to call them out. The Deltas, the AKAs, the Zetas, all of them. Where is the school for black girls? Because everybody's talking about all these issues around black boys, and more increasingly, we're seeing black girls going through all kinds of issues and challenges, right? And so don't say go David. I'm saying, where are you? I would love to see black fraternity, black sorority step up and establish a school, one school in New York City for girls. There's the Young Women's Leadership Schools in New York. They are run by a white woman. She's like, if black women are not going to do it, I'll do it.
Wow.
That to me is a sad indictment. Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, Alpha Kappa Alpha. Where you at? But they do this to me. Love you, David. Go save those boys. No, I need to say, y'all one of the most powerful. We go, Kamala Harris, yes. Stacey Abrams, yes. Well, guess what? Little black girls in Queens and Brooklyn, Bronx need y'all. Where you at? Just saying.
Brother David Banks, you definitely gave us a beautiful challenge. And I think the challenge that you're talking about right now is one that we have to accept as a community. We can't expect someone who's not treating us right to teach us right. And I just want to thank you, brother, for the insight you provided today, the energy you brought to this conversation, and the fact that you're on the front line and you're not giving up. You're not giving an inch, man. And we just want to say thank you on behalf of All Men Are Not Created Equal podcast. This has truly been an enriching session for us. And I'm getting in a chat room. We need to do part 2. We have about 45 seconds left. I'm just going to read this last comment by my brother Kevin Giggers, my Morehouse brother. He said, beyond the system, the gatekeeper culture must end to get the aforementioned leadership. Oftentimes, the potential leaders that are needed tend to also become marginalized in regards to said needed leadership. Let's work to get rid of the gatekeepers. And Brother Banks, do you have any closing remarks from us for us? And I do want to also shout out Sister Rochelle Fleming, who also serves with me on the CCC Council, and Madam President as well. But what are your closing remarks, sir? Thank you again for such a beautiful afternoon.
I would say this to you, Brother Giggers. I think you're right on point. We got it. And somebody else said, if you stand up like this, the system will target you. I saw that as well in the chat. That's why you need visionary leaders. That's why you need courageous leaders. You want me to tell you one thing? I would say everybody that's running for mayor, tell them to make David Banks the chancellor. We'll change this. I've committed my life to this work, to trying to help our young people. We're going to have a new mayor in January. We're going to have a new chancellor. We're going to have a new opportunity to turn this around. But if the wrong people are in those seats, you're going to get a lot of the same old, same old. I offer myself up, and I tell you that. So let's see what happens. Our community can rally around that. We can change this educational system into a place that actually does work for our people. But it's not the job of one person. It is the full-on community coming together to make a difference. And so I appreciate you, and I appreciate you so much for having me on. And I can see that you got a big following because the chat has been fire. So,
it's on fire.
Let's continue to build, brother.
Absolutely. Again, Dr. David Banks, again, we love the work you're doing. We love what you're doing. And we're going to try to do our best to support you in your initiative. And I wish the chancellor position was on the ballot, because you already have my vote. But I believe the chancellor position has to be appointed by the mayor. But you have my vote. any a mayoral candidate that we talk to, that's going to be one of the agenda items that they're going to have to agree to before we support them. That's the bottom line. But I want to thank you so much. And before we leave, we're going to ask you again to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Brother Esquire. Subscribe to our Facebook page, Brother Esquire, as well as our Instagram page, Brother Esquire. We want to thank our broadcasting partner, NNV News. Please subscribe to their page as well. And they also have a Cash App that we're asking you to contribute to help keep us independent, help us to continue the work that we're doing. And you see, we're doing it unadulterated. We don't care what masters say. We don't care about the gatekeepers. We're keeping it, as they say in the streets, a buck, or we're keeping it 100. So please support us in the work that we do. Again, Brother David Banks, thank you much. And thank you all for allowing us to occupy your space and time. Peace.
Peace.